Welcome to Mighty Married Moms. Join us at our kitchen table twice a week as the Mighty Married Moms, Debbie, Linda, Wendy, invite spectacular guests to weigh in on staying sexy, vibrant, and healthy, building marriages with soul-satisfying connection, raising happy, healthy, successful kids. Conversations with Mighty Married Moms will bring you closer to the life you really want. Episode 49.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mighty Married Moms. Today, we are going to be having a wonderful kitchen table conversation with our guest, Julie Lythcott-Haims, who is the Dean of Freshmen and Undergraduate Advising at Stanford University until she left in 2012 to pursue writing full-time. She's spoken and written widely on the harm of helicopter parenting, and her work has appeared on TEDx Talks, in Forbes, and the Chicago Tribune. Her first book, How to Raise an Adult, Break Free of the Overparenting Trap and Prepare Your Kid for Success, comes out in June. So by the time you're hearing or listening to this, the book will be out. And Julie, thank you so much for being here with us today. We're really excited to have you.
I am so excited to be here with the three of you. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, this is great. Well, we should start out by asking you kind of very briefly, what was your journey to becoming the dean, and then what made you decide to go into writing full time?
Well, I'll try to give you the brief version of that story.
Okay.
I was originally a corporate lawyer, and I decided that it wasn't nourishing me the way that I had hoped my profession would. And so while I was highly compensated, I felt that my work every day wasn't as aligned with my values and my sense of self as I had hoped it would be. And so I did a little bit of introspective work. What am I good at? What am I really good at? Not what do people say I'm good at, but what am I good at? And what do I value? And how can I find work at the meaningful intersection of those things? Right. And that little analysis led me to the understanding that I enjoy working with people. I enjoy helping humans on their path. I thought if I could get work at a university helping college students open into their adult selves, as I like to say, that might be very rewarding work. And it turned out indeed to be incredibly rewarding. I was the university administrator for 14 years, and the last 10 of which were as Dean of Freshmen. So that's how I got to that line of work. And then I began writing. I began writing poetry and song lyrics as a way to know myself better, as a way to understand the world better. And at some point I decided, I was in my mid-40s and realized, there's something next for me, as there is for my students and for all of us, I believe. I always wanted to be attuned to that. What's next? What else do I want to do? Life is precious and life is short. I loved my work as dean, and I'm really also loving having the chance to try to make a little bit of meaning in the world through my writing and through my words.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
I love the
very deep.
The what's next, because I was at an event earlier this year, and somebody said, "What's the sentence that, or the question that you ask yourself that defines your life?" And almost immediately, I'd never thought of it before, but almost immediately I thought of what's next.
Yeah.
And so I think that almost every day I wake up and say, what's next, which is kind of a scary thing. But but I think that's wonderful in the context of as you're transitioning from what you're doing and trying to figure out, where can you, I love that what you said, what am I good at and what do I value? To find that out. That's really wonderful.
Cool.
Yeah. Thank you. So how do you define overparenting, and what damages have been seen from this problem? So
there are a lot of terms that are out there: helicopter parenting and snowplow parenting. And, I try to stay away from those labels, which are fun and interesting, but I try to focus on the actual behavior. So I've distilled it down to 3 different types, and a parent could be one of the types, 2 of the types, or all 3. Some people are definitely not one of the types, but definitely, they're not type 1, but they're type 3. They are this: overprotective. That is this notion that the world is terribly scary and terribly unsafe, and therefore I must protect and prevent instead of preparing you for that scary world. I mean, I think the statistics are clear. The world is not less safe. We just believe it is because of this tremendous media hype around violence toward children. And even if the world is scarier, I would contend, we've got to prepare our kids to thrive out there.
Yeah,
not
nice.
Right? We can't always be there for them. So the overprotective type is the first. And then the second is overdirective. This is the parent that would fall into the quote unquote tiger parent category. The parent that has the sense that I know best, I know what it takes to succeed, and I will tell you what you must do in order to make it in the world. And that will be a set of activities as well as a particular academic path, a very narrow definition of success. And so it's the particular instrument or the particular sport, a particularly precise set of, grades and scores, schools, majors, careers, and professions. And then the third type is a little bit more of a bigger basket. It's the hand-holding concierge type. Okay. It's the parent that wants to be their kid's personal assistant, the parent who doesn't believe that the kid can really handle interactions in the world on their own. The parent who, with tremendous love and the best of intentions, is doing way too much for their kids, talking to grown-ups, teachers, principals, coaches, referees, arguing on their behalf when there's a conflict or a dispute, but also the more passive, filling out their applications and kind of keeping track of their deadlines and stuff like that. So those are the three: overprotective, overdirective, and hand-holding. And the impact, Debbie, is this psychological undercutting of the self. If you think about it, there's this beautiful concept in psychology that I've learned a lot about as I've done research for this book, coined by Albert Bandura, who's a psych professor at Stanford. This notion of self-efficacy, which apparently is this sense of self that develops from doing things. You have to see that your effort and your outcome, your efforts and behaviors and intentions result in outcomes. And we parents have shown up with the best of intentions when we're actually doing the living of life for our kids, protecting them from this, telling them how to do that, managing it all for them. We're depriving them of the chance. I don't want to put too fine a point on this, but we're almost depriving them of a chance to be, to actually be a human. And I don't know that there's any harm greater than that. I mean, yes, there are harms greater than that. There are parents who are actually neglecting their kids. There are children that don't have food and shelter, and that is a different kind of harm.
Right. Yeah.
But this also is a tremendous harm, and it's showing up in communities of affluence where parents have disposable time and disposable income to spend on doing way too much for their children.
Yeah. So you've just described three that we don't want to be. What do you describe the kind of parent that we do want to be?
Well, the folks who do research on types of parenting and the effectiveness of each have come up with kind of a grid. The axes go from how responsive you are to a child's needs, to a child's self, to their interests, and how demanding you are. And so the sweet spot apparently is, and I write about this in the book, is authoritative parenting.
Right.
That's right. You know about this, right? So it's the sweet spot between, it's both highly responsive. You care, your kid knows they matter to you. You listen when they have concerns. You take an interest in their experience, but it's also highly demanding. You have high expectations, and you expect, them to work hard and be good people, and you hold them accountable. You give them responsibility and hold them accountable. So it's this high expectations, high responsiveness place called authoritative parenting. In contrast, none of us want to be neglectful, which is one of the types. But these other two types, authoritarian is the tiger parent type. It's highly demanding and not at all responsive to their needs. And then there's the indulgent or permissive type, which is highly responsive to their needs. That's the concierge parent, but not at all demanding. No rules, no accountability, and so on. So we want to be in that sweet spot where we're asking a lot and giving a lot.
Do you find that parents have a hard time identifying that sweet spot for themselves?
Oh, absolutely. This is where, I mean, I shouldn't go much farther before I say I'm a parent too. For your viewers and listeners, please know I have 2 teenagers. They're downstairs right now. It's the last day of school, and I am humbled every day, by how little I know.
In their eyes, right?
No, in my eyes too. I think, wow, I really blew that. Was anyone looking? Because I really blew that. So yeah, I think, look, we, all of us, wherever we are, whatever country or state we're in, whatever our age, whatever our gender, as parents, we've got this beautiful biological thing that clicks in that means we love this child. We want this child to thrive and be successful, and we want the best for them, and we would do anything for them. And so, with that as a given, I would say to your question, what's happened is we've just gotten a little off track about what it actually means to prepare our offspring to thrive and survive out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. The thing that comes to mind when you were speaking before about aborting, well, you might not use the word aborting, but I wrote down aborting self-efficacy by doing too much for them or helping them with their schedule or whatever. It reminds me of an infant that is learning to crawl, and it said, you don't really want to crawl. Let me just help you. Just stand up. And they can't, because you need to develop those muscles. You have to go through that. And another analogy that I think is just so great is the little chicken or some bird coming out of an egg, poking, and you've got the egg in front of us here on the table, and we keep looking at it, and it pokes every 20 minutes, and then it rests, and then it pokes again, and you get so like, oh, let me help you, and you crack it open gently and allow the little bird to come out, and it dies because its neck muscles aren't developed. Mm-hmm. It needs to do that struggle. Mm-hmm. It needs to poke and take as long as it needs to develop. And so by assisting them, you're not.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, Wendy. I completely agree with you. And I actually write about the toddler or the infant learning to stand and to walk piece in the book. Well, because I say it's probably the last time we're willing to let them fail and not do something about it. We actually say,
isn't that interesting?
Keep going. Yeah. We know we can't force that skill on them, but I think that's the last time we think we can't force it, So, and then the egg and the chick analogy is beautiful. I have sometimes spoken about the butterfly, the caterpillar turning into the butterfly, and how, if you interfere with that process and try to help open that chrysalis, the butterfly, just as with the chicken, the little chick, doesn't develop the strength it needs. It's a perfect metaphor. And we shouldn't be surprised that these metaphors come from nature, because
we're nature.
We're mammals. We're actually mammals we're mammals with clothing and a cell phone, but we're still mammals, and we're supposed to raise our offspring to be able to raise the next generation of offspring. Now, how are they going to be able to do that if we haven't given them the skills, if childhood hasn't prepared them, to be the adults our species wants them to be?
Right. Yeah. So what are some of the best things that parents can do to prepare their kids for success, whether or not they go on to college?
Sure. Well, I think it's a great segue from the last point. I think we've got to really take the long view. We've got to embrace the fact that as parents, we have the lucky privilege of getting to be alongside another human or a number of humans who are growing up to be humans. This is a privilege. They're their own unique individual. We're supposed to, give them shelter and food and love and help them make their way. But it is their way. We're not to construct their path for them. Nobody, not any of us listening or having this conversation wants to be on a path of someone else's making, nor do our kids. Okay. So we've got to humble ourselves, at the altar of childhood and realize it's not about us. We are to help them make their way. All right. So if we keep in mind the long view goal, which is we want to raise a healthy, vibrant, self-actualized adult who can look after us, to be frank, one day.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
We're going to need those skills. So the question then is, what do we do in the day today? So I want, what I try to do is keep in mind that long view, that my kid isn't going to magically turn into an independent human at age 18. Okay. It doesn't magically happen. And as a college dean, I saw that not happening. Okay. Yeah. So it was really my role as dean that helped me come back to my own kids when they were 8 and 10. And I realized I was doing too much for them. Mm-hmm. I had this aha moment that I write about in my book where, you know, I'd given this big speech to parents of freshmen at Stanford saying, okay, trust that you've inculcated the values and skills that your kid needs to thrive at college. Trust that the college is going to do as much as we can for your son or daughter. Now please go home. Okay, so this was my speech. And then the next day I came home and I was still cutting my 10-year-old's meat. Yeah. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be one of the parents. I'm still cutting their meat. And then, of course, the question was, for myself, was, when do you stop cutting their meat? Okay.
Yeah.
When do you stop cutting their meat? When do you stop holding their hand to cross the street? When do you let them talk to strangers? Okay. Because life is about being able to feed yourself and get places and talk to others, among other things. These are skills we're supposed to teach them. Okay. So we think it's protective to do these things for them, but in fact, it's not. So here's I know that I've told you a long story. Here's what it boils down to. Okay.
Story's
Every day we should think, what can I do today to grow my kids' independence?
Yeah.
I want them to be more independent next week than they are today. I want them to be more independent next year than they are today. So we have to know our own kid, you know, their temperament, their personality, their skill level. We have to know our own neighborhood. You know, what are the issues germane in our particular environment? I do not have a blanket answer for every parent is what I'm telling you. What I'm saying is use your good judgment about your kid, your family, your neighborhood. And remember, you're supposed to be stepping back, doing less for them so they can develop that skill and that independence. Yeah. I think that's a mindset we have to carry with us all the time. And sometimes it requires just holding our breath as we see them try something that feels a little beyond their comfort zone, maybe a little bit scary, a little bit edgy, you know, not super dangerous. I'm not advocating that, but, you know, at every step toward independence, there's a little bit of risk. That's where the growth comes from. So as parents, we have to get a little comfortable, ironically, we have to get a little comfortable with our own discomfort and let those things happen.
You know what comes to mind for me? Yes. It's helping a child with the training wheels, and you're holding the bike with them, and then you go, okay, and you let them go, and maybe they're going to fall off, but they got the helmet typically, and then maybe the knee pads. But you do have to let go. So as a parent, we do have some sort of muscle memory that you can call back on that says, I know what it feels like to let go of the bike.
That's exactly right.
Right.
That's exactly
or
right.
let go of the child when they're swimming. Like all right, I'm gonna take my hands away.
Right.
You know, but I'm not leaving. But
right. So Wendy, you'll be horrified perhaps or bemused to learn that there's a product that I saw being marketed. They were doing one of those online fundraising campaigns for something called Minibreak, which is a little brake device you can attach to your kid's rear bicycle wheel. And you, the parent, have a remote control. So when you're many yards away, you can hit the remote control and it brakes the bike if, you know, you're standing at your driveway and you see your kid heading out into traffic. Now, of course, none of us wants that day to come when our kid heads out into traffic. At the same time, our kids got to learn not to head out into traffic. And so us, you know, pressing a button as parents to activate the brake teaches the child nothing except your mom or dad will always be there to prevent the trouble a kid never learns. So I just think that's a disastrous, it's crazy.
Not you mentioned it seems dangerous. Like,
of course it is. It's got a very short-term benefit and a very long-term, a big picture harm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I am horrified, not so much bemused.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Well, I didn't want to put words in your mouth. Wendy.
Right. So did you have any, when you were Dean of Freshmen, did you have any kids that showed up in more recent years that were prepared, and could you make any distinctions or lines traced back to how they were raised that you can share?
You know, over the years, as more and more parents were coming to the university and not leaving, you know, wanting to be involved virtually or, you know, actually. And by the way, this wasn't just a Stanford thing by any means. My colleagues around the country at colleges and universities in every tier, every region would say this was happening. So yeah, over the years, we saw more and more parents coming to do that work or to have that presence or that involvement. And those kids, those students seem so content to have their mom or dad kind of help or do or be so involved. In contrast were the many, many other students who were behaving as you'd expect an 18-year-old or a 20-year-old or a 22-year-old, to behave. They didn't have it all figured out, but they wanted to try. They didn't have a completely clear sense of self. Whoever did at 18 to 22, but they were interested in knowing themselves.
Yeah.
So I think that's the subtlety. It was sort of Group A, the ones with the very involved parents, were very content to have, things handled for them. Group B was hungry to develop that adult self, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, so what I saw was just in Group B was, they could tell you about their hopes and their dreams and about their fears and about the things they'd tried and that had worked and that hadn't worked. And, they just had a sense that they were in charge or should be in charge of their own life, and that whatever came, difficulty or opportunity, that it was theirs to contend with. Yeah.
So, it's interesting. I don't know if you think that this is more so a product of the United States and our sort of view on parenting. I used to teach sculpture at the Walnut Hill School for the Arts, and they have a very large, foreign population that comes to the country, particularly Asian, but from all over the world. And these kids at high school, like ninth grade on, they're traveling by themselves all across the world. They take the train into the city and they go do their lessons and they come back and they figure it all out. And I always thought, wow, that seems so much for a high school kid, but now I have two boys, and one who's entering high school next year and one who's in high school now. And I think my kids haven't done that. Now I'm feeling a little bit like maybe I should, push them to do more of that stuff. And I definitely fall into that. I probably do a little too much category.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to do that because I recognize that the importance of not doing it. But I find that it seems like from other countries, that's more the case. Kids are used to themselves more than American kids.
Yeah.
Well, Linda, don't feel badly because, everyone's in that boat with you around public transportation, or boat. That's the wrong analogy. Okay. So there's so much packed into your question. I just want to try to hit the different pieces of it. So is this happening elsewhere? Yes, it's happening elsewhere. I know that because I've just sold my book rights in Brazil and in China. So there's some people there saying, hey, we need this book also. I've also had interest from Mexico, from colleagues down there at a university that I'm involved with. So I have heard from, so far, those three large countries saying, hey, we have this same concern, that we've got young adults who don't really seem to be ready to take the mantle of leadership, from us. I also think there are some cultures in which a 3-generation or 4-generation living is very normal culturally. So, grandparents and parents and kids live together and have an interdependency. And that's, I think for the most part, a very beautiful thing. In those environments, whether that's in our country or elsewhere, I think the question is for, can we be sure that the younger generation is developing the skills so that they'll have what it takes to be the elders, to be the ones in charge when the time comes,
Right.
And to this issue of transportation, when I was doing research for my book, I had some focus groups around the country. And, I remember a parent, I think it was in Northern Virginia, saying, if I dropped my teenager off in the city and said, find your way home, he would just start to cry, and this is a city where there's, a metro and there's great public transportation. And, and this is sort of one of those aha moments parents have when they realize, wait a minute, TSA will not let me accompany my child through security if I'm not on the plane with them. At some point they're going to have to be able to take a plane ride without me.
Yeah.
Right. So this is our job. We've got to give them those opportunities. If there's a local bus, ride it with them, practice that, help them learn the trip, and then at some point, let them take the trip by themselves. If you've got a subway, a metro, a train, let them do that. Go with them, practice it a number of times. and then ultimately let them do for themselves. I've been blown away by the amount of freedom my own kids have have finally embraced for themselves. Because in the beginning, when I was hovering too much and then I stopped hovering so much, they looked at me like, what's wrong with you? And why aren't you right next to me?
Right.
And, my son has started getting on his bike and riding miles and, to the movie theater, many miles away, taking his bike on the train, the Caltrain here in the Bay Area, down to San Jose or up to San Francisco, then riding in those cities. Which is fantastic. My daughter had a camp up in San Francisco, which is about a 45-minute train ride from here. And I thought, what am I going to do? I can't drive her every day.
Right,
She's going to have to take the train. She was 12. And I practiced it with her, for 3 days. And we practiced how you sit on a train, how you act, how you look, what's that face? What's that?
Yeah, what's the face? Yeah.
Right, that face. And, when I picked her up the fourth day when she had finally ridden by herself, I barely recognized my daughter walking across the street toward me. It was as if she was a year older. She had this confidence about her, I know how to be in the world, and I feel good about being in the world. She didn't look like a frightened child. She looked like a young woman. And, I had tears in my eyes because this is what I want for her, so.
Of course. Oh my goodness. That's what we would all want. When we mentally picture our family, our children, we want them to walk around the world confidently. And it's interesting that we have culturally have drifted to a place where that's less likely because of what we're doing in the name of love or in the name of devotion today.
And your example is exactly right. I mean, our daughter just graduated from college this month, but when she was early in high school, she and a group of friends wanted to go into Boston. We live out in the suburbs. We have there aren't even any sidewalks in our town.
Yeah.
And so one of the other mothers of this group of girls said, I'll take them in. I'll show them how to do it. So she went in with the 4 girls, showed them how to get in and on the train and wander around downtown. And we'd been into Boston a number of times, so our daughter was at least familiar with the public transportation downtown. But to get into town by herself was new. And so after they did it with this other mother once, then the 4 of them were like, okay, we can do this. And so they did it a bunch of times. Now contrast that with a similar 10th grader who already lives in Boston. Yeah. And they're on the public transportation constantly because that's what their environment is.
Yeah.
So really, like you said earlier, it depends on what your circumstances and your environment and your situation.
Yeah. If I may, Debbie, that's a great example. And it highlights how very often, how unexpectedly our, all that we can provide them, the sort of privilege and opportunity of living in a lovely suburb, might actually deprive them of the skills that they might have learned if they lived, in the city. I mean, obviously there's affluence in the city as well. And I don't mean to draw that distinction inappropriately, but what I mean is there's a protective bubble often around our kids, particularly if we're in a suburb, particularly if you get places by parents driving you, whereas kids who grow up in the city, whatever class, working class, middle class, upper middle class, they, certainly working class kids are learning to make their way for themselves. And I actually talk about this in the book. I talk about how, working class kids who don't have parents who have the time and money to spend hovering over them because the parents are just trying to make ends meet, thank you very much. Right. Working class kids end up with a skill set that will enable them to thrive in life, that their more affluent peers might lack. And we've got to make sure that affluence doesn't breed this sort of, there's a colleague, someone in Massachusetts who I interviewed for the book. His name is Joe Maruchek, and he's a superintendent of the Mendon-Upton School District. And he coined this beautiful term. He says, too many kids today are like veal. They're like veal. They're carefully cultivated, and they're led to the slaughter. I mean, real life will slaughter someone that hasn't been toughened and weathered and sort of had to cope and had to learn. And, if too much is done for them, they end up out in the world sort of bewildered and helpless to be slaughtered like veal. And I think it's a wonderful term. And we've been using terms like hothouse orchid and teacup to describe fragile young adults who can't survive outside of the hothouse, or, are very fragile. If they fall, they're broken. But Joe, who goes by Dr. Maru, because he's got this really long last name, right. Maruchek. But Joe coined this term, veal. They're like veal. And none of us wants that for our kids. We want them not to be veal. We want them to be warriors. We want them to solve the problems and live life. And we want them to find love.
Yes.
We want them to find love. And to find love, they got to find their self. They got to know themselves, right? So,
yeah. Great stuff.
Oh my
Great
gosh.
Stuff. Yeah. Well, Julie, we are out of time, unfortunately.
Oh my gosh.
It flew by. Yeah. But this has been a fabulous conversation, and I think it's given us a lot of really great things to think about and apply as we're raising our kids. And so thank you so much for being with us here today.
Yes.
Yeah. And we would love to know. I know your book is out in June. I can't wait to get my hands on it as we're recording this. It's still in pre-order, but it'll be out really soon.
What's the name of it again?
Oh, yes. Thank you. Why don't you give it all?
Yes. Sure. It's called How to Raise an Adult, and it comes out June 9th.
June 9th. Great.
Yeah.
And, I can't wait to get it.
What other things, what other projects can you share with us? Where can people find you online? Just go ahead and plug yourself.
I thought you were saying, what's your next book? I don't know the answer to that yet. Well, first of all, Debbie and Wendy and Linda, I want to thank you for having me. This has really been such a treat for me. I really appreciate the opportunity. I am all over. I have a website, howtoraiseanadult.com. So I would invite your viewers and listeners to go there, howtoraiseanadult.com. The hashtag for social media is #raisingadults.
Okay.
And if you go to the website, you'll see my book tour events listed. And, hopefully I'll be coming to a city near you here in the States, at least in the coming 6 to 9 months.
Right.
So I'm kind of going to be, in a lot of different places, but find me on social media. I'm pretty active on Facebook and Twitter.
Well, and if you come to Boston, we'll come see you.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, bring me to Boston. That would be great.
Get a book signed.
That's great.
Okay, great.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for being with us today. We were just interviewing Julie Lythcott-Haims and her book, How to Raise an Adult. And we are the Mighty Married Moms. I am Debbie Owen, and this is
Wendy Williams
and
Linda Tighe.
And thank you, everybody, for being here. And we will see you at our next episode. And in the meantime, please subscribe on iTunes, leave us a rating and review, and don't keep us a secret. See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Mighty Married Moms. Tune in twice a week on Mondays and Thursdays to meet fascinating and inspiring guests who will help you create the life you've always wanted.
You can find these episodes and special gifts just for you at mightymarriedmoms.com, as well as a link to our Facebook community,
where we continue the conversation around the kitchen table. Please also help share the love by leaving a review on iTunes. We'll see you next time.